norms, values, and beliefs, because it is aiming to change practice. But what you see on the left side is something we also learned. It is so diverse, and even what we included in the paper in February of this year is way outdated, because they're thinking about their strategies for next year. We'll always be behind. But they're sophisticated. They move and they chop and change. They're able to do that, and they have a lot of money. So they play the long game. So don't be fooled by anything else. That's the 55 billion, and I said earlier that more infants are now being fed formula than ever. The two graphs I didn't describe earlier in the earlier presentation, but what you see on the top graph, or maybe we'll take the bottom graph first. These are all the 4 different categories of formula. There's standard formula, follow-on, growing up or toddler, and then specialized. And they're all increasing. But the metric is not the dollar value or the number of tons. These are the sales per capita. So these are the number per children is all increasing. The top one is about, you can't really see the writing, but it's on the x-axis on the horizontal, it's the sales of standard formula, and then the y-axis is breastfeeding practice. Now again, these data were, we didn't have so many countries, but you see that where sales are higher on the, going further to the right on the x-axis, you have lower breastfeeding rates, and where you have lower sales, that's closer to the 0, on the left side of the x-axis, you have much higher breastfeeding rates. So they correlate. I said the name of the paper, paper 2, is Marketing of Commercial Milk Formula, a system to capture parents and communities, science and policy. And that's quite a striking title, but I want to show you why we think it's justified. Let's just read some of these quotations. A mother from Guadalajara in Mexico. All those scientific acronyms like DHA, you don't know what it is, but it sounds cool. It's supposed to be a nutrient that goes directly to the baby's brain for stimulation. The mother in Vietnam. The benefits my baby will get. If I want to promote brain development or height or digestion, I will find the respective formula. She thought that she could pick and choose which benefits she would get by the formula. And their beliefs have been captured. The mother from Johannesburg, I actually like that premium brand. I love the color, the expensive look, the gold, it gives it that expensive taste, as if it's procured the best quality and something unique and different. All the formula milks are the same. They have to be by Codex standards. But she responded to the gold color and the higher price, and her values have been captured. And the lady from London, she says, we were looking online and that little advert, Brand Z, popped up. With these cookies, they must know we're looking at baby stuff, and it popped up out of nowhere. And that's the process of capture. And industry spends a lot of money on packaging. Everything about it, the color, the little scientific symbol, the name, the little extra words for premium babies. Well, I want my baby to be a premium baby. I think my baby's a premium baby. Therefore, I will spend more because this is for premium babies. And the language on it, specially formulated for babies with gas or colic or crying, they know all the words of comfort that parents are reacting to. The baby with the glasses, going to be smarter, quicker. They know what parents want. And so what they exploit are both the anxieties and also the aspirations. And here you see it, and these were all from China, but these are actual adverts, and you see the DHA. Now, it wouldn't even been in Chinese script, but it's European English, so that has some value to it. The baby who's the professor, you see the light bulb on the board. They communicate, and yet the systematic reviews show that none of these things, the polyunsaturated fatty acids, the DHA, none of them have an evidence base to say that the addition of these things to formula have any impact on health outcomes. So DHA and polyunsaturated fatty acids are important in brain development, but the addition of these things to formula milk have no proven or any benefit. But they put them on the tin, they make the claim. What is this advert selling? What's it appeal? What's it highlighting? The mother is exhausted. And what it's actually selling is sleep. But I said earlier that these things are sophisticated. This is the CEO of a company. This was at a trade conference, and this was the original text. Infant nutrition this is what he said, wasn't necessarily about the ingredients or innovation. What we are selling is actually sleep. We're selling peace of mind. None of this is by chance. They do their homework. They know what is the highest order emotional benefit. What do we talk about? The benefits of breastfeeding, reduced diarrhea. For that mother standing on the stair, is she interested in reduced diarrhea or reduced pneumonia or reduced otitis media or whatever? She's so exhausted she needs to sleep. And that we don't touch that in our counselling and in our support. This is some stuff from the UK. So I don't know if you can see it there, but on the left-hand one, you see it's with milk protein broken into smaller pieces. What do you think that's starting to play to? As a child health person or nutritionist, what is it speaking to? Possibly two things that it's speaking to. It's easier digestion, maybe colic, things like that. And the other thing it's actually appealing to is about allergy. Because it's talking about, so this is on an ATM. They have the same adverts on an ATM as you're putting in your card. It's coming up on the ATM. Milk protein broken into smaller pieces. What you then see is that in the United Kingdom, there has been a 500% increase in the prescribing of specialist formula for cow's milk protein allergy. What you also see is literature coming from the companies talking about cow's milk protein allergy. This is to the parents, so they are targeting the parents and saying, go and speak to your doctor about cow's milk protein allergy. The GPs and stuff aren't getting any training. So the mother comes in through the door asking about cow's milk protein allergy. He isn't sure what. The mother's saying, maybe my child needs a specialist milk. And the GP, because he is looking for a solution, gives, okay, I'll give the specialist formula because I need some solution here myself. And then you see industries talking about how they are setting up learning hubs for pharmacists. So they're looking at the supply and the demand side of this argument, that they're setting up both, they're trying to drive the awareness of allergy within the families. They are setting up pharmacists who are also now trained by them for treating allergies. You get research that is being funded by the formula companies themselves, which is the evidence base for guidelines. And then you take away one more layer and you see that this one particular company in 2019 opened a specialist facility in the Netherlands. It cost 240 million euros and was only producing specialized infant formula. And in the blurb about it, it says that the company was banking on baby allergy to rabies. They join the dots. They build the facility. They push the materials out to families. They train pharmacists. And they have their sales. Industry's powerful, and these 6 companies, they control 60% of the market sales globally. Profits are worth about, are in excess of 20%. So those 4 companies generated 187 billion in 1 year. So that's equivalent to the 62nd largest country by GDP, I think it's Costa Rica. They own between them $316 billion in assets, which is more than the private wealth of every African country except South Africa. They employ more than 500,000 people, which is greater than the health workforce of South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Lesotho combined. They're powerful. And what we see are adverts. And we don't see this other nexus, this whole capability, the strategy, the medicalization of health, of the business opportunity of the baby. We don't see that because we're not standing back. We're not strategists, we're clinicians. We're public health servants. But this is what's happening. And those decisions are not being taken in Colombo, they're being taken probably in Zurich. And this is the slide I showed earlier. It allows them, they present, part of it becomes very benevolent and they appear to be socially responsible, but all the time they're working behind the scenes. They are normalizing this private-public sector partnership. And then you see what happens in terms of pre-lactals and what type of pre-lactals being given. You see the impact on legislation to protect breastfeeding and women in terms of labour, and they lobby against it. And those are just small examples, because whenever you look at the international code, what's going to happen with your draft legislation on the breastfeeding code? Is it going to make it through Parliament in the way that your colleagues have drafted and put out there? Is there going to be public consultation that's going to cause it to be somehow reduced and diminished? Because that's what happened. It happened in South Africa. There was a public consultation and industry flooded that public consultation, where it ended up it got stuck in the mud. They operate in Codex Alment. They are working on the international regulatory authorities. They are working at every level. So marketing is not the advert. It's not the poster in the clinic. It's not even the sponsorship of the health professional meeting, but it is all of those. It's not one, it's the whole package. I just want to take a few minutes on health professionals, because in 2016 there was additional resolution that went forward, and you were talking about sponsorship. And it just really clearly says, the code has always said this, but it just clarified it. So in marketing terms, all of us would be considered category entry points. That's what they talk about. It's nothing specific to formula, it's any marketing. It's the mental trigger to purchase. That's what a category entry point is. But we are category entry points because industry knows that what we say influences the purchasing patterns of the people who come through our doors. And that creates for each of us conflict of interest. So it's the one thing I would disagree with, it's not just the bureaucrats or government. Each one of us individually and our associations have every opportunity to act. It's not just government. We have scope to influence and do things ourselves as well as government. It's not one or the other. But let me just show you a little bit of the data. This was from the 8,500 interviews. In all countries, health professionals were reported as the main source of education. Okay? So we are highly, highly influential. And the contact between the representatives from the formula companies with the health professionals in some countries was extremely common. They were given incentives by way of commissions from sales, ambassadorial roles, funding for research, trips, all of that. Things that I am certain happen here in Sri Lanka. It may not be allowed, but it happens. And what do mothers say? This is this cognitive dissonance, because we stand here and say breastfeeding is good and important, it's the best, and then we say something that's absolutely contradictory, where we are the ones to give a recommendation to formula feed. And that's exactly what we saw in Bangladesh. 57, it's a country actually which has very strong code legislation. And yet 57% of women reported getting the recommendation to formula feed from the health professional. Let me tell you just another little kind of example of this. On the right side, this is a picture taken from a report by a marketing company in South Africa. So how many of you know the UNICEF ecological model, where you have the baby and the mother at the center, and then the next ring out is the family, and then the community? We know it, okay? So this is the same idea. But in South Africa, this is the report. You can find it online still. I thought it would be taken down. This company called Sahara Salt Consulting were asked to do a stakeholder mapping. So first of all, they were asked to identify who are the influential people in terms of infant feeding. And then they were asked to say, what is the influence of each of those stakeholders? And then they were asked to effectively say, what are the assessment and key drivers and needs of each of those? So how much can they be influenced, okay? And so what they had at their center, it's hard to see it, the scientific and academic community was at the core. The next level out was the professional organizations, then the healthcare professionals, and then the consumer. Because they knew that if they could influence the key people in the academic world, that influence would then go to their associations, to the individual members, and influence the consumer. Worse than that, you can see in this, they actually named all the people that they were evaluating. Jerry Kuvadia, Neil McCarroll, Harun Salaji, Linda Richter, Ali Dancy, people in government, Leslie Bamford, Eddie Mhlanga, the NGOs at the time this was done. This was whenever HI was being very common, the Treatment Action Campaign, TAC, Médecins Sans Frontières, the pediatric nurses, all of them were identified, and they looked at the level of influence of those individuals and what were their needs. I don't know if it's been done in Sri Lanka, but it's hard to think that it's being done in one country. This is the approach for marketing. They learn their landscape. And we are so naive in this sense. And if you look at associations, we looked at the websites of the pediatric associations back in 2019. 60% of the pediatric associations showed in their websites some type of relationship with industry. Some other people then, about 2 years ago, looked the same at midwives, found the same sorts of numbers. So they are sponsoring associations, they are sponsoring individuals. And I had there's a bit of a small disclosure. I came here with my family a couple of years ago to go to the Pediatric Association meeting here, which was great, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And but there was no sponsorship from industry at that meeting, 2016, something like that. And I know that then, a year or two later, there was a lot of sponsorship from industry. So these things come and go. It's very, very hard to avoid that sponsorship in terms of meetings. But let me show you some photographs. These were taken in February. And I was talking with some colleagues just at the tea break who were at the same meeting. This was the Indian Pediatric Association. So India is a big country, okay, and there's a lot goes on in India. But this was I don't know how many of you others can remind me. There were thousands of people at the meeting. Thousands, okay? But have a look and tell me what you see or what you don't see. Okay, see if you can spot it. Is there anything that you see or you don't see? Because I'll show you the next slides from Europe. This is the European Pediatric Association. And when you go into the exhibition hall, the very first thing that you saw in the European Pediatric Association, the biggest stand was from a formula company. All the little chairs where you can sit down, formula companies. In India, there was not one stand, not one. Because whenever I started seeing it, I actually then went round everywhere and there was not one sponsorship from a formula company. It can definitely be done. And the other thing is that you don't need 5-star hotels. Actually, the India Pediatric Association was held in a 5-star hotel. But you don't need 5-star hotels. You know? And yet that's kind of what professionals think. So what we have learned, marketing is multifaceted, it's very sophisticated, it's very well resourced, and therefore it's very powerful. And it's being made even more powerful through the digital systems, which we haven't even talked about. Marketing for formula is actually very similar to the marketing of every other product. There's nothing truly remarkable in terms of the approach. But what is different is that this has lifelong consequences for children. You know, so it makes a difference for their entire life, their immunity, their risk for diabetes, obesity, heart disease. It makes a difference. And also, there is an international code. There is no other product on this planet for which there is agreement by the World Health Assembly to regulate the marketing of except tobacco. Nothing else. So this marketing goes absolutely, flies in the face of agreement by the World Health Assembly, your country. And lastly, industry has been very successful to gradually shift and nudge our values and beliefs. And this is just a colleague at the back saying, what can we learn? In public health, we appeal to the rational mind. The p-value, the breastfeeding is best, it reduces this, it reduces that. Marketing works to the emotional mind, because that's where the decision making occurs. They know the other side, but that's where they know the decisions happen. Marketing in itself is not evil. It's not inherently bad, it's not. Nor is profit, actually. You know, probably all of our pensions will depend on investments. That the question is when the profit and the shareholder interest damages public health outcomes. And when shareholder interest and that business opportunity is allowed to exploit something as fundamental as the birth of a baby. When your worries and your stresses about your baby, then you pry into that and you use that to create doubt and uncertainty and to change what is actually the best. Whenever what you want best for your child in terms of their educational development, all of those things, they appeal to that and say, maybe if you give this little bit of formula, it'll be even better than what you have already. And so what we're putting together is a better picture. It's like the jigsaw puzzle is starting to come together. And that's important for us, because if we don't understand all the facets, how can we ever act? So really just lastly, as physicians and professional associations, the evidence and the rationale for breastfeeding is really strong. There's nothing more that we need to do in terms of justifying our position. And we know that interventions to support breastfeeding, they work. we need to recognize that we are thought leaders and significant influencers. We need to understand that. And with that, we've also got to recognize that we are now the targets. We're high value targets for marketing and the industry. And in truth, we are susceptible. We are not immune to these things. Therefore, individually, as professional associations, we need to put in place the measures to constrain the influence of industry. We need to protect the legislation, but that's not enough, because we need to insist on the investment for the monitoring and the implementation. And where there are violations, we should be asking, where are the sanctions? Where are the sanctions? Where are the penalties? If there's no consequence, why change your behaviour? My children, stop doing that, stop doing that. If there's nothing that happens, then why stop? So we need to work with government, but all sectors, health, trade, justice, labour, to develop, implement and monitor that legislation to stop marketing, which I think is unethical in this circumstance. This is not only about breastfeeding and formula feeding. This is the broader issue of commercial determinants. We want a world where our children, our most precious commodity, are protected. And that, we certainly see breastfeeding and formula feeding as an area where that is. We should understand that none of this is a criticism of women. Never allow this discussion about marketing to become a critique of women, their circumstances, their decision. This critique is only about the marketing practices. We need to separate these things out, say we need to support all women in their circumstances for their feeding, but the marketing, we can completely unite on that, and to say that this type of practice should not happen. Thanks very much.